people, I am back. I am back into this story again about Yehoseph. Now, Yehoseph was fine, and that's what we would say today. He was the most handsome young man in Egypt. Honey, you know, he was so handsome that everybody liked him. Isn't that something? When you have a certain beauty, it seems as though everybody is attracted to you. And sometimes it seems like you find favor with everyone. So even though that this Joseph was a slave, his beauty, his allured you. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't trying to get you to like fall in love with him or befriend him, but the way that he looked when you looked upon him, it just made you gravitate to him. It made the people want to befriend him. And that was the comeliness of his appearance. Even the body and his physique was just so well put together that even the women, when they looked upon him, they were amazed. Not only were the women amazed, but even the men were amazed. And he was really in the wrong place in Egypt, because in Egypt, those men and even the women, many of them were homosexuals, and many of them liked it men, and they wanted to do lewd things to them. So anyway, we're going to talk about this Joseph with his fine self. I do believe that maybe my eyes would have looked upon him as well if I was back there in that day. At least I believe it, the way they describe his fineness. But anyway, let me go on. So anyway, we are at the point where Yehoseph, the slave of Potiphar. So it says, when Yehoseph was sold as a slave to the Ishmaelites. Did you know that the Ishmaelites was his cousins? Because his great-grandfather, Abraham, married Hagar, who was the daughter of a Pharaoh, and he had the son named Ishmael. And Ishmael's seeds became the Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites also not only dwelt in Egypt, but they also dwelt in Mesopotamia. And Abraham gave them the whole land of Arabia. So I can understand why perhaps the Most High allowed it, that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. Why is it in Arabia? Because that's the area where his other children were. So even though the Most High had given up Jerusalem and allowed the enemies and the Ishmaelites to take control of Jerusalem until the Edomites and the Europeans end up taking control of that area and almost ousted them out of the area, okay? So they are grappling over that land, our land, right now. But anyway, to make, as I said, I always get off track. But anyway, the Most High sent us over there to his other children's land, the land of Arabia, and that is where Mount Zion is. I mean, I'm sorry, Mount Zion, not Mount Zion, Lord forgive me, not Mount Zion, Mount Sinai. Forgive me, folks. Sometimes I get carried away, but that's where Mount Sinai is. Mount Sinai is in Arabia, and it is called Jebel El Lawz, L-A-W-S, and, or is that A-L-W-Z? I think I better check that out, but it's A-L-W-Z or either A-L, no, it's A-L-W-Z. See, I got to get it right. And I could delete this little mistake that I just said on Facebook, but you know, I'm not, right now, I just don't feel up to it. But anyway, Jabal El Laws. And if you want to go to that area, there are those that will tell you, oh no, what is that? Mount Sinai is not in Arabia. Mount Sinai was in Egypt. Not so. They will say there's no such thing, but let me let you know, if you could go to the government of Arabia and get the permission to go and see the Mount Zion there, Mount Sinai there, you will know that it has been fenced in. It is surrounded with a fence. You can see in that particular area the broken down altar that they set up. Not only will you see the broken down altar, you can also see how they engraved the rams and the cows into the stones that were there. If you go to that area, you will see where Moshe beat the rock and it split, and you can see where the water came and flowed almost into a river at Mount Sinai. Okay, and you can also see the rocks, how they were surrounded to contain the cattle and the sheep that they had. And so, indeed, there is a Mount Sinai, whether you believe it or not. And the Most High allowed it to be in the land of Ishmael, Hagar's sons and his descendants, whether you like it or not. But anyway, as I shall move on. So when Yehoseph was sold as a slave to the Ishmaelites, he kept silent out of respect for his brethren. Isn't that something? His brethren had treated him cruelly, but I guess maybe he kept silent because he probably thought about his behavior and all that he did to them, and so he didn't want to make them ashamed. And it says, and he did not want to tell his masters that he was the son of Jacob, a very powerful man. And if Jacob had any word at all that his son was being taken, his son was kidnapped, he really would have got mad if he knew that his sons had plotted to kidnap him. Or really, it wasn't a kidnapping, it was a taking of a son and selling him. And it's kind of just like having them kidnapped, like sort of like, and trying to make him get lost, like, boy, get lost. We tired of you anyway because you seem to be the favorite. Now we can get some time from a father. But anyway, that's just my little ad lib. But anyway, let me go on. And so he did not tell his masters that he was the son of Jacob, a great and a powerful man in war. If he would have set his army together, and he really didn't need much, all the boys of his, they would tear some stuff up. But anyway, and at that time, I had to add this. One could chase 1,000, and two could put 10,000 to flight. And I'm telling you, the Most High had some bad boys. He had some bad children, because I don't know if you knew, but even Abraham was a great military man and soldier. And he would take 300 men, or should I say, he took 300 men and went and whooped the heck out of a whole bunch of armies with just 300 men. Also, don't forget about Gilead. Gilead, he took 300 men and went and whooped up a whole army. So when the Father do decide to get with you, it don't matter if they have thousands and thousands of troops. It don't matter. When the Father get in it, he tear up, and he only needs a few men. Because our Creator knows that if he have a whole lot of men, if you say you have a whole lot of troops behind you, you get a big old army behind you, you get all the military might and the weapons behind you and everything, and you messed around and you won the war, you got the victory. See, you would not give the glory to the Most High, because you will give your glory to yourself and say, look what I have done with all my weapons. You see, the Father don't play like that. See, the Father want to make sure that you ain't even that ready. You appear not to even be that strong. Matter of fact, you appear not to hardly have anything at all. You appear not to hardly have any weapons. You appear not to have enough weapons. Because if he come through there and aid you with his Malachim, and you win the war with hardly anybody, guess what? You got to give him his glory. Because you didn't do it, he did. And that's how our Father works. So all these folk running around here worrying about, oh man, these folk got all these weapons, and they got weapons of mass destruction and everything, and look what we got. But let me tell you something. If Yahweh gets up in there, if the Creator gets up in there, it don't matter how many weapons of mass destruction anybody got, anybody's army got. Honey, let me tell you something. No matter what they have, the Father can overthrow armies with just a few. That's how he works. But anyway, let me move on, because you're probably getting tired of me right about now. And it says, even when he came, who we talking about? We are talking about Yehoseph, even when he came to the Midianites with the Ishmaelites, and the former asked after his parentage. He still said he was a slave. That boy knew he wasn't no slave, but he still said he was a slave in order to keep his brother's honor. Let me keep on. And it says, only in order not to put his brethren to shame. But the most distinguished of the Midianites rebuked Yehoseph, saying, now, you art no slave. Thy appearance betrayeth thee. And he threatened him with death unless he acknowledged the truth. Yehoseph, however, was steadfast, and he would not act treacherously towards his brethren. Now, in this case, he could have acted treacherously against his brother. He could have brought anger down upon his brother if Yehoseph, not Yehoseph, but if Yaakov would have found out in an inkling of the matter that it was his brothers that sold him as a slave. So he didn't want to cause them no stress with their father. And I'm pretty sure his brothers probably needed the attention of their father while he was away. Can you imagine all those years that they missed his love and his nurturing and his attention, because all of his attention was upon Yehoseph. So it was a twofold thing. You understand? He needed to get out the way a little while. Okay, so the other little brothers can get some love and attention, or should I say big brothers. Now let me move on. Now, when Yehoseph arrived in Egypt, the owners of Yosef could come to no agreement regarding him. Each desired to have sole and exclusive possession of him because he was just so handsome. He looked like a dignitary already. He looked like a noble already. Everybody wanted him. Can you understand how it is when someone is just so handsome, so beautiful? Looks like everybody wants him. And if you're not that beautiful and you're not that handsome, Lord have mercy, you'd be sitting there just wishing that, you at least had a taste of what they were sometimes. Well, I have to be very honest. As a youngster, I had a sister, and my sister was so beautiful. She was just beautiful. And I looked at myself and I said, I'm the ugly duckling. I tell you, everywhere we went, honey, if I was there, it was like I wasn't there. If our friends was there, it was like we wasn't there, because the only person they was interested in was talking to her. So I could understand how Yehoshaphat's brothers may have felt, especially when the who was that? The Midianites looked at them and they looked at him and they laughed and they was like, no, the way he looked, he said, no, he looked like he your master and you the slave. Anyway, moving on. It said, so they therefore decided to leave him with the shopkeeper until they should come back to Egypt again with their merchandise. And the Most High let Yehoseph find grace in the sight of the shopkeeper. All that he had, his whole house, he put into the hands of Yehoseph. And therefore the Most High blessed him with much silver and gold, and Yehoseph remained with him for 3 months and 5 days. Haven't you noticed that also everywhere the Most High drove us to with these enemies of ours, into every nation that got a piece of us, got wealth and still are getting wealth off our behinds. And now they want to get rid of us, But you know what I'm saying? We like baby kids. You can't get rid of us. You might kill some of us, but ain't no way, honey, you won't get rid of us because we multiply. No matter what you do, we multiply. Because when the Most High promised Abraham, he said, your descendants shall be as the sands of the sea, and honey, and as the stars in the sky. All right, now come on now, which are many. So let me go here. So the father blessed the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper had him in his possession for 3 months and 5 days. At that time, there came from Memphis the wife of Potiphar, and she casted her eyes upon Yehoseph, of whom comeliness of person she had heard from the eunuchs. See, his handsomeness, it went abroad. His handsomeness went abroad just as much as the beauty of Sarah went abroad all throughout Egypt when she entered the land. So let's get back to where we are. So it says, she told her husband how that a certain shopkeeper had grown rich through a young Hebrew, and she added, but it is said that the youth was stolen away out of the land of Canaan. Go therefore and sit in judgment upon his owner, and take the youth into thy house, that the Most High of the Hebrews may bless thee. For the grace of heaven, it rests upon him. It rests upon the youth. And Potiphar, he summoned the shopkeeper. See, men listen to their wives. At least some men listen to their wives. But in this case, he really didn't know what he was listening to, because she had other things up her sleeve. Now let me move on, because I'm interrupting the story. It says, so Potiphar summoned the shopkeeper, and when he appeared before him, he spoke harshly to him, saying, what is this that I hear? That you stealest souls from the land of Canaan, and doeth carry on traffic with them? The shopkeeper protested his innocence, and he could not be made to recede from his assertion that a company of Ishmaelites had left Yehoseph in his charge temporarily until they should return. So Potiphar had him stripped, naked, and beaten, but he continued to reiterate the same statement. Then Potiphar summoned Yehoseph, and the youth prostrated himself before this chief of the eunuchs, for he was third in the rank of the officers of Pharaoh. And he addressed Yehoseph and said, art thou a slave or a freeborn man? And Yehoseph replied, a slave. Potiphar continued to question him. Whose slave art thou? Yehoseph, I belong to the Ishmaelites. Potiphar, how wast thou made a slave? Yehoseph, they bought me in the land of Canaan. But Potiphar refused to give credence to what he said. And he had also him stripped and beaten. The wife of Potiphar, standing by the door, saw how Yehoseph was abused, and she sent word to her husband, thy verdict is unjust, for thou punishest the freeborn youth that was stolen away from his place as though he were the one that had committed the crime. As Yehoseph held firmly to what he had said, Potiphar ordered him to prison until his master should return. And in her sinful longing for him, his wife wanted to have Yehoseph in her own house. And she remonstrated with her husband in these words. Wherefore doest thou keep the captive noble-born slave a prisoner? Thou shouldest rather set him at liberty and have him serve you. He answered, the law of the Egyptians does not permit us to take what belongs to another before all titles are made clear. Said Yehoseph, and Yehoseph stayed in the prison for 24 days until the return of the Ishmaelites to Egypt. Now, let me make sure I turn this page right. It says, meanwhile, they had heard somewhere that Yehoseph was the son of Jacob. And they therefore said to him, why didst thou pretend that thou wast a slave? See, we have information that thou art the son of a powerful man in Canaan, and thy father mourns for thee in sackcloth. Yehoseph was on the point of divulging his secret, but he kept a check upon himself for the sake of his brethren. And he repeated that he was a slave. Now, I'm going to tell you that there was love. He must have really thought upon what he had done. And he had nothing but love for his brothers. Maybe as a child, and he was mischievous, maybe at that time he may have known what he was doing, or maybe he just misunderstood what it was that he was doing when he was lying on his brothers and ruining their reputation before their father on a continuous basis. But anyway, let me move on. It says, nevertheless, the Ishmaelites decided to sell him, that he not be found in their hands, for they feared the revenge of Jacob, who they knew was in high favor with the Most High and with men. The shopkeepers begged the Ishmaelites to rescue him from the legal persecution of Potiphar and clear him of the suspicion of man theft. The Ishmaelites, in turn, had a conference with Yehoseph and bade him testify before Potiphar that they had bought him for money. He did so, and then the chief of the eunuchs liberated him from prison and dismissed all parties concerned. With the permission of her husband, Potiphar's wife sent an eunuch to the Ishmaelites, bidding him to buy Yehoseph. But he returned and reported that they demanded an exuberant price for the slave. She dispatched a second eunuch, charging him to conclude the bargain. She wanted him in her house, honey, no matter what the cost was. It said because she had evil designs, okay. But anyway, so that to conclude the bargain, no matter what the charge, and though they asked 1 mina of gold or even 2, He was not to be sparing of the money. He was to be sure to buy the slave and bring him to her. Bring him to her. The eunuch gave the Ishmaelites 80 pieces of gold for Yehoseph, telling his mistress, however, that he had paid out 100 pieces. Yehoseph noticed the deception, but he kept silent, that the eunuchs might not be put to shame. Thus, Yehoseph became the slave of the adulterous priest Potiphar. Now, let me continue. Or Potiphar, as he was sometimes called. He had secured possession of the handsome youth for a lewd purpose. Did you hear what they called him? His name was Potiphar, but they called him Potiphar. That's a woman's name, okay? And he wanted him for lewd. Let's say it again. Say it with me. Lewd purposes. Okay. But the angel Gabriel mutilated him in such manner that he could not accomplish it. His master soon had occasion to notice that Yehoseph was as pious as he was beautiful, as he was handsome. For whenever he was occupied with his administration, he would whisper a prayer. O Most High of the world, thou art my trust. Thou art my protection. Let me find grace and favor in thy sight and in the sight of all that see me, and in the sight of my master Potiphar. When Potiphar noticed the movement of his lips, he said to Yehoseph, doest thou propose to cast a spell on me? Nay, replied the youth. I am beseeching the Most High to let me find favor in thine eyes. His prayers was heard, and Potiphar conceived himself that the Most High was with Yehoseph. Sometimes he would make a test of Yehoseph's miraculous power. If he bought him a glass of Hippocras, Hippocras, he would say, I would rather have wine mixed with absinthe, whatever that is, Absinthe. And straightway, the spiced wine was changed into bitter wine. Whatever he desired, he could be sure to get from Yehoseph, and he saw clearly that the Most High fulfilled the wishes of his slave. Therefore, he put all the keys of his house into his hand, and he knew not aught that was with him, keeping back nothing from Yehoseph but his wife. Seeing that the Shekinah rested upon him, Potiphar treated Yehoseph with not as a slave, but as a member of his family. For he said, this youth is not cut out for slave's work. He is worthy of a prince's place. Accordingly, he provided instructions for him in the arts and ordered him to have better fare than the other slaves. Now you see how the Most High can have you in your enemy's house or your oppressor's house, and he can raise you up in status right in their house. And he can raise you all the way up also in status to a high position, and also turn you around and have you go against that same oppressor who oppressed you with ultimate power, with superior power, to the point that you become victorious over your oppressor. It is the Father who raises his children up right in the house of their enemy, in order so that when the time comes, he raised you up for the defeat of your enemy. Now, the Creator, our Father, works in mysterious ways. He works in ways, honey, that you just don't understand, that you can't even conceive, that you don't even know what's going on when it's going on. And while you got your plan, the Most High have already laid out a plan. Okay. Now, let me tell you. Now, let me see. It says, Yehoseph thanked the Most High for his new and happy state. He prayed, blessed art thou, O mighty one, that thou hast caused me to forget my father's house. What made him present? Let's see, what made his present fortune so agreeable to him was that he was removed from the envy and jealousy of his brethren. He said, when I was in my father's house and he gave me something pretty, my brethren begrudged me the present. And now, O mighty one, I thank thee that I live amidst plenty. Free from anxieties, he turned his attention to his external appearance. He painted his eyes and dressed his hair and aimed to be elegant in his walk. But the Most High spake to him, saying, thy father is in mourning, in sackcloth and ashes, while thou doest eat, drink, and dress thy hair. Therefore I will stir up thy mistress against thee, and thou shalt be embarrassed. Thus Yehosheph's secret wish was fulfilled, that he might be permitted to prove his piety under the temptation, as the piety of his father had been tested. You understand that? Lord have mercy. You know what? The Most High, he has a way of putting us in our place. And he can put us in our place. And he can also put us in a place. Because while he was putting him in his place, he put him in a place. And he put him in a place of high standing, though he had to go through the test. And some of us is going through a test. But guess what? You might be going through the test, but you can make it. Just be steadfast and unmovable and be courageous and trust in the Most High that he can bring you through. Because guess what? Everything you need is already in you. Now let's keep it moving. Yehoseph and Zeluka, I might not even be saying her name right, so I'm going to spell it. It's Z-U-L-E-I-K-A. It says, threw the stick up in the air. I'm going to do that again. Throw the stick up in the air. It will always return to its original place. Like Rachel, his mother, Yehoseph was of ravishing. Did you hear what I said? Yehoseph was of ravishing beauty. Now you remember that. You remember that when if they try to show you any kind of a picture, any kind of statue, any kind of paint that make Yehoseph look like an ugly somebody, I'm telling you right now, they lying. This Yehoseph, he was ravishing and he was beautiful. He was so pleasant to look upon. He looked so good, you had to stare and it was hard for you to stop staring. That is how beautiful and how ravishing he was and how handsome, and his physique was like, my. You know what I'm saying? Make you want to sing, my. Sure look good. And that's what she was thinking. It sure look good tonight. Okay, she didn't say that. That was just me. But anyway, let me go ahead on. And like Rachel, his mother, Yehoseph was of ravishing beauty, and the wife of his master was filled with invincible passion for him. Her feeling was heightened by the astrological forecast that she was destined to have descendants through Yehoseph. She thought it was her. Unfortunately, it was not. It said this was true, but not in the sense in which she understood the prophecy. Yehoseph married her daughter Asenath, Asnath, later on, and she bore him children, thus fulfilling what had been read in the stars. In the beginning, she did not confess her love to Yehoseph. She tried first to seduce him by artifices. On the pretext of visiting him, she would go to him at night, and as she had no sons, check this out, she would pretend a desire to adopt him. Yehoseph then prayed to the Most High in her behalf, and she bore a son. However, she continued to embrace him as though he were her own child. Yet he did not notice her evil designs. Finally, when he recognized her wanton trickery, he mourned many days and endeavored to turn her away from her sinful passions by the word of the Most High. She, on her side, often threatened him with death and surrendered him to castration in order to make him amenable to her will. And when these means had no effect upon Yehoseph, she sought to seduce him with enticements. She would say, I promise thee that thou shalt rule over me and all that I have, if thou wilt but give thyself up to me, and thou shalt be to me the same as my lawful husband. But Yehoseph was mindful of the words of his father, and he went into his chamber and fasted and prayed to the Most High that he would deliver him from the toils of the Egyptian woman. In spite of the mortifications he practiced and that he gave the poor and the sick the food apportioned to him, his master thought he lived a luxurious life. For those that fast for the glory of the Most High are made beautiful of countenance. That look like a lot of us need to do a lot more fasting. The wife of Potiphar would frequently speak to her husband in praise of Yehoseph's chastity in order that he might conceive no suspicions of the state of her feelings. And again, she would encourage Yehoseph secretly, telling him not to fear her husband, that he was convinced of his purity of life, and though one should carry tales to him about Yehoseph and herself, Potiphar would lend them no credence. And when she saw that all this was ineffectual, she approached him with the request that he teach her the words of God, saying, isn't that something? She even went that way. Oh, I want to know about your God. So she said, if it be thy wish that I forsake idol worship, then fulfill my desire, and I would persuade that Egyptian husband of mine to abjure the idols, and we shall walk in the law of the Most High. Yehoseph replied, the Most High desireth not that thou who fear him shall walk in impurity, nor hath he pleasure in adulterers. Now, another time she came to him and said, if thou would not do my desires, I will murder the Egyptian and wed with thee according to the law. Whereat Yehoseph rent his garments, and he said, O woman, Fear the Most High, and do not execute this evil deed, that thou mayest not bring destruction down upon thyself, for I will proclaim thy impiety, impious purpose to all in public. Again, she sent him a dish prepared with magic spells, by means of which she hoped to get him into her power. Sound like she had some drugs to me, but anyway. It said, but when the eunuchs set it before him, he saw the image of a man handing him a sword together with the dish. And warned by the vision, he took good care not to taste of the food. A few days later, his mistress came to him and asked him why he had not eaten of what she had sent him. He reproached her, saying, how couldst thou tell me? I do not come nigh unto the idols, but only unto the Most High. The Father, the Creator of my fathers, has revealed thy iniquity to me through an angel, but that thou mayest know that the malice of the wickedness has no power over those who fear the Most High in purity. I shall eat thy food before thine eyes, and the Most High of my fathers and the angels of Abraham will be with me. The wife of Potiphar, she fell upon her face at the feet of Yehoseph, and amid tears she promised not to commit this sin again. But her unholy passions for Yehoseph did not depart from her, and her distress over her unfulfilled wish made her look very ill, that her husband said to her, why is thy countenance fallen? And she replied, I have a pain at my heart, and the groaning of my spirit oppresses me. Yeah, I bet it did. It said, once when she was alone with Yehoseph, she rushed towards him, crying, I will throttle myself, or I would jump into a well or a pit if thou would not yield thyself to me. Noticing extreme agitation, Yehoseph endeavored to calm her with these words, remember, if thou makest away with thyself, thy husband's concubine, Estelho, thy rival, will maltreat thy children and extirpate thy memory from the earth. Now, these words, greatly spoken, had the opposite effect from that intended. They only inflamed her passion the more by feeding her hopes. She said, there seest thou doest love me now. It suffices for me that thou takest thought for me and for the safety of my children. I expect now that my desire will be fulfilled. She did not know that Yehoseph spoke as he did for the sake of the Most High and not for her sake, not to go to bed with her. You understand? It says his mistress, or as she was called, Zuleika, Zuleika, pursued him day after day with her amorous talk and her flattery, saying, how fair is thy appearance, how comely thy form. Never have I seen so well favored a slave as thou art. Yehoseph would reply, the Creator who formed me in my mother's womb has created all men. Zuleika, how beautiful are thine eyes, with which thou hast charmed all Egyptians, both men and women. Yehoseph, beautiful as they may be while I am alive, so ghastly they will be to look upon in the grave. Zuleika, how lovely and pleasant are thy words. I pray thee, take thy harp and play, and also sing that I may hear. thy words. Joseph, lovely and pleasant are my words when I proclaim the praise of the Most High. Zuleika, how beautiful is thy hair. Take my golden comb and comb it. Yehoseph, how long wilt thou continue to speak thus to me? Leave off. It were better for thee to care for thy household. Zuleika, there is nothing in my house that I care for, save you alone. But Yehoseph's virtue was unshaken. While she spoke thus, he did not so much as raise his eyebrow to look at his mistress. He remained equally steadfast when she lavished gifts upon him, for she provided him with garments of one kind for the morning, another for noon, and a third kind for the evening. And I bet you he looked it good in them clothes. Nor could threats move him. She would say, I will bring false accusations against thee before my master. And Yehoseph would reply, and the Most High executed judgment for the oppressed. Okay, or I will deprive thee of food. Whereupon Yehoseph would reply, and the Father giveth food to the hungry. Or she would say, I will have thee thrown into prison. Whereupon Yehoseph would say, and the Most High looses the prisoner. Or she would say, I will put heavy labor upon thee that will bend thee double. Whereupon Yehoseph would say, and the Most High raises up them that are bowed down. Or she would say, I will blind thine eyes. Whereupon Yehoseph would say, the mighty one openeth the eyes of the blind. When she began to exercise her blandishments upon him, he rejected them with the words, I fear my master. But Zuleika would say, I will kill him. Yehoseph replied with indignation, not enough that thou wouldst make me an adulterer of me. Thou wouldst have me be a murderer besides? And he spoke furthermore, saying, I fear the Most High, my creator. Zuleika, nonsense. He is not here to see thee. Yehoseph, great is the Most High and highly to be praised, and his greatness is unmeasurable. Thereupon, she took Yehoseph into her chamber, where an idol hung above the bed. This she covered, that it might not be a witness of what she was about to do. Yehoseph said, though thou coverest up the eyes of the idol, remember the eyes of the Most High run to and fro through the whole earth. Yes, continued Yehoseph, I have many reasons not to do this thing for the sake of the Most High. Adam was banished from paradise on account of violating a like command. How much more should I have to fear the punishment of the Most High were I to commit so grave a sin as adultery? The Most High is in the habit of choosing a favorite member of our family as a sacrifice unto himself. Perhaps he desired to make choice of me, but if I do thy will, I make myself unfit to be a sacrifice unto the Most High. Also, the Most High is in the habit of appearing suddenly in visions of the night unto those that love him. Thus did he appear unto Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I fear that he may appear unto me at the very moment while I am defiling myself with you. And as I fear the Most High, so I fear my father, who withdrew the birthright from his firstborn son Reuben on account of an immoral act, and gave it to me, were I to fulfill thy desires, I would share the fate of my brother Reuben. With such words, Yehoseph endeavored to cure the wife of his master of the wanting passion she had conceived for him. while he took heed to keep far from her heinous sin, not from fear of the punishment that would follow, nor out of consideration for the opinions of men, but because he desired to sanctify himself, the name of the Most High. Blessed be he before the whole world. It was this feeling of his that Zeluica could not comprehend. And when finally carried away by passion, she told him in unmistakable language what she desired. And he recoiled from her. She said to Yehoseph, why doest thou refuse to fulfill my wish? She wanted to have sex with him bad. Am I not a married woman? None will find out what thou hast done. And Joseph replied, if the unmarried women of the heathens are prohibited unto us, how much more their married women? As the Most High liveth, I will not commit the crime thou biddest me to do. In this Yehoseph followed the example of many pious men who uttered an oath at the moment when they are in danger of succumbing to temptation and seek thus to gather moral courage to control their evil instincts. Now, he was a man. And what's her name? Zeluica was fine as wine. And honey, when she was coming on him like that, and I guess she must have been real heavy then. And the enemy tried to get in his eyes because girlfriend must have started looking good, and he had to try to grab his, control himself to get back. To talk to himself, to talk to his conscience, so he could talk to God probably. While he was talking to her, he probably was talking to the Father to save him, to keep him, to keep his hands back. Anyway, let me go on. As I said, I can get carried away sometime. But anyway, it said when Zeluica could not prevail upon him to persuade him, her desires threw her into a grievous sickness. And all the women of Egypt came to visit her. And they said unto her, why art thou so languished and wasted, thou that lacketh nothing? Is not thy husband a prince great and esteemed in the sight of the king? Is it possible that thou canst want aught of what thy heart desires? Zeluica answered them, saying, this day shall it be made known unto you whence cometh this state. Within you see me. She commanded her maid servants. Let me tell you how fine this man. Oh my God, I didn't even see Yehoseph, but I can just imagine with my eyes and with my mind. But so she demonstrated. She commanded her maid servants to prepare food for all the women. And she spread a banquet before them in her house. She placed knives upon the table to peel the oranges. And then she ordered that fine, handsome man, Yehoseph, to appear. She made sure he was arrayed in costly garments and wait upon her guests. Now, I want to tell you something. Just imagine what his costly garments looked like, doubled upon his ravishing beauty. On top of his illustrious, fine body. Just think about it. What he looked like walking in the room. Let me stop for a minute. Dressed in royal, costly garments. So when Yehoseph came in the room, the women, this man was looking so good. The women, they could not take their eyes off of him. And they all cut their hands with the knives, and the oranges in their hands were covered with blood. But they, not knowing what they were doing, continued to look upon the beauty of Yehoseph without turning their eyes away from him. You know what I'm telling y'all? He was fine. He was fine. Then wine. As my daddy would say, he looked better than a speckled puppy in a red wagon. And hell, I don't know what that looks like. But anyway, it said, then Zuleika said unto them, what have you done? Behold, I set oranges before you to eat, and you have cut your hands. And all the women looked at their hands, and lo, they were full of blood, and it flowed down and stained their garments. And they said to Zuleika, this slave in your house did enchant us, and we could not turn our eyes away from him on account of his beauty. She then said, man, this happened to you that looked upon him but a moment, and you could not refrain yourselves. How then can I control myself in this house? He abideth continually, who see him go in and out day after day. How then should I not waste away or keep from languishing on account of this man? And the women spake, saying, honey, it is true. Who can look upon all this beauty in the house and refrain her feelings? But he is thy slave, woman. Why doest thou not disclose to him that which is in your heart, rather than suffer thy life to perish through this thing? I can just imagine them women sitting back, talking, man, fine. Look at his physique. Look at those muscles. Oh, look at him. I can just imagine it. You know, the book ain't gonna tell us everything. You know, the book ain't got no time to put probably the hour or 2 hours or however long they was in the house that they elaborated and communicated and talked about this man all up in here looking good and smelling good. You know, he was smelling good with all of the finest colognes of Egypt, and it made him even more alluring. Come on now. This little bit we see here ain't what all they talked about. So let me continue. They said, why doest thou not disclose to him that which is in your heart, rather than suffer thy life to perish through this thing? And Zuleika answered them, daily do I endeavor to persuade him, but he will not consent to my wishes. I promised him everything that is fair, yet have I met with no return from him. And therefore I am sick, as you may see. Is there anybody out there who has ever been sick in love? Well, let me tell you, as a young, ignorant 17-year-old, I had the time, honey, when I was sick in love. And I'm telling you, I was sick in love. But honey, by the time I reached the age of, what, about 18 or 19? Honey, look, let me tell you, honey, I was like, you know what? We not doing that no more. Sister right here, we don't go to that level. I don't go to that level. The only, look, I don't go to that level, honey. I ain't in love with nobody like that. I'm not in love with nobody. I'm gonna fall sick. Now, the only way something like that would happen to me, if the father whipped something on me and just like this woman was whipped up, the father put in her to go after him. Now, we read that part. Now, if the father put something in me to go after some man and with such great passion, then maybe I would do something like that. But if the father don't put that in me, I'm going to tell you here right now, we ain't going there. Now, let me go on. Now, it says that her sickness increased upon her. Her husband and her household suspected not the cause of her decline. But all the women that were her friends knew that it was on account of the love she bore Yehoseph. And they advised her all the time to try to entice the youth. On a certain day, while Yehoseph was doing his master's work in the house, Zeluacah came and fell suddenly upon him. Now, do you hear what this woman did? They said, fell suddenly upon him. That means that she leaped on him, jumped on him, she fell on him, she grabbed him, held him up, whatever. But Yehoseph was stronger than she, and he pressed her down to the ground. Can you imagine a woman gonna take something? She gonna take her some stuff. A woman that she done get that enraged in love and in passion that she gonna take her a piece. Honey, I remember one time this brother man, I was visiting. He was enraged, honey. I'm telling you, he tried to want to take him some. I tell you, me and that man, we wrestled from one end of the floor to the next while the man was trying to grab my pants to get my pants, but honey, it didn't happen. I tell you, I was so tired. I was a tired soul. I was sweating and everything while me and him was wrestling and rolling from one end of the floor to the other. And look, honey, I was wore out and he was wore out because I tell you, me and him we were doing it all over the floor, wrestling and tug and rolling, honey. He wasn't about to get nothing here. I was tired and he was tired and he was tired of fooling around with me, honey. And I got up and I got away and got out of the house. So it didn't work. That mess didn't work. But just imagine a woman doing it. This woman leap, jump, however, she gonna take her some. But Yehoseph was stronger than her. So he had to grab this woman. He had to press her down to the ground. Okay, get some sense in her head. And Zeluacah, she wept. And in a voice of supplication and in bitterness of soul, she said to Joseph, hast thou ever known, seen, or heard of a woman, my peer in beauty, let alone a woman with beauty exceeding mine? Yet I try daily to persuade you. I fall into decline through love of thee. I confer all this honor upon thee, and thou would not hearken unto my voice. Can you see the tears streaming down? Is it by reason of fear of thy master that he punished thee? As the king liveth, no harm shall come upon thee from thy master on account of this thing. Now, therefore, I pray thee, listen to me and consent unto my desire for the sake of the honor that I have conferred upon thee, and take this death away from me. For why should I die on account of thee? Really? Okay. Yehoseph remained as steadfast under those importunities as before. Zeluica, however, was not discouraged. She continued her solicitation unremittingly, day after day, month after month, for a whole year, but always without the least success. For Yehoseph, in his chastity, did not permit himself even to look upon her. Wherefore she resorted to constraints. She had an iron shackle placed upon his chin, and he was compelled. Do you hear me? He was compelled by an iron shackle to keep his head up and look her in her face. She was a bad Mama John, and a sinner, and an adulteress, because I'm pretty sure she wanted him so bad, honey. I'm pretty sure she imagined just having her in her sleep. You know how sometimes you go to sleep and you're just so engrossed in somebody, and you go to sleep and you may not have them in real life, but you sure have them in a dream. Come on, and I bet you that she did something like that. I bet you she did. And I bet some of y'all did it too. Anyway, let me move on. So it said, Yehoseph resisted the temptation, seeing that she could not attain her object by entreaties or tears. Zeluica finally used force. Well, I kind of thought she used force when she jumped on the man and tried to take it. But it said here that she used force. When she judged that the favorable chance had come. Honey, this chick wanted this man so bad, she plotted and she schemed. And she gonna use her some force. She gonna show up. She act like she was a man. She gonna take it. You understand what I'm saying? She gonna take it. So let me say something right here. I never really thought about it. I can imagine men trying to take it, but I never really imagined women trying to take it. But after dealing with this here, I guess I can imagine women trying to take it, but I can even go further. I'm an author of several books, and I used to sell my books all over the city of Detroit and other cities and different things like that, even as far as Jamaica. And I used to also sell in the homosexual nightclubs. And I'm telling you, the women in those clubs were so aggressive. I can see it. They too would try to take you if you allowed them to have their way with you. Honest to God. So that's why when I would go into the clubs to sell my books, I'd make sure I would take a man with me. All right, now to try to make sure that I had me. Look, I got a man. You understand? When my man no more than a man in the moon, but I got a man. Okay, you know I'm not up in here looking for nobody. No, You know, and I there was women in there looked at me and they was like, you know what? I bow. Be with me. But anyway, let me move on. So women can do the same thing too. But anyway, let's move on. And I'm not into women. I like the men. Okay, now come on. Now, it said, when the Nile overflowed its banks, and according to the annual custom of the Egyptians, all repaired to the river, men and women, people and princes, accompanied by music. Zuleika remained at home under pretense of being sick. This was her long looked for opportunity. She thought. She rose up and ascended to the hall upstate, excuse me. She thought, and she arrayed herself in princely garments. She placed precious stones upon her head, onyx stones set in silver and gold. She beautified her face and her body with all sorts of things for the purifying of women. She perfumed the hall, get the picture here, and the whole house with cassia, cassia, and frankincense. She spread myrrh and aloes all over, and afterwards set herself down at the entrance to the hall in the vestibule leading to the house through which Yehoseph had to pass to his work. Can you imagine? Girlfriend just sitting there, standing, looking so beautiful and alluring. Thinking I got my chance. Ain't nobody in this house. I'm gonna get this man tonight if I don't do anything else. And she's just standing there, waiting like a thief in the night. Lord have mercy, waiting for that fine, ravishing, handsome, beautiful, physique man to just walk on by. Walk on by. Walk on by. And behold, Yehoseph came from the field, and he was on the point of entering the house to do his master's work. But when he reached the place where Zuleika sat, and he saw all she had done, he turned back. Woo! Look, something must be going on here. He had to turn back. He's like, oh, Lord have mercy. She must, look, woo! She must have almost had them fires going now. Anyway, he had to turn back. I wondered, did he almost run? I wondered, did he almost trip? But I just know what the boy said, look, I got to get out the way. His mistress, perceiving it, called out to him, what aileth thee, Yehoseph? Go to thy work. I will make room for thee, but that thou mayest pass by to see to thy seat. Yehoseph did as she bade him. I'm just wondering how he did it. How did he walk back? How he walked by her, trying to get by. What did she do? Did she try to rub up against him? Oh, anyway, but Yehoseph did as she bid him. He entered the house and he took his seat and he set about his master's work as usual. Then Zuleika, she stood before him suddenly in all her beauty of person and magnificence of raiment, and repeated the desire of her heart. Can you imagine this man sitting at his desk, looking up? Wait a minute, did it not say that she had a chain about his neck that made his head have to look at her? And he's sitting there and he got to look at all this this beauty in front of him. You know what I'm saying? Oh, Lord. Whew. And it says, then Ludica stood before him suddenly in all her beauty of person and magnificence of raiment, and repeated the desire of her heart. She wanted him, y'all. It was the first and the last time that Yehoseph steadfastness deserted him. Did you hear that? She was looking so alluring and so beautiful, so, should we say, sexy. And if we listen at how she described herself, she must have been a most beautiful woman. That it said right here that it was the first and it was the last time that Yehoseph's steadfastness deserted him. It said, but only for an instance. For instance, boy had to catch himself. It says, when he was on the point of complying with the wish of his mistress. Whoa, Jack. Looks like I want to really wish I was a fly on the wall to see that instant somehow. But he saw an image of his mother Rachel appearing before him, and that of his aunt Leah, and the image of his father Yaakov. The last addressed him thus: in time to come, the names of thy brethren will be graven upon the breastplate of the high priest. Doest thou desire to have thy name appear with theirs? Or wilt thou forfeit this honor through sinful conduct? For know, he that keepeth company with harlots wasteth his substance. This vision of the dead, and especially the image of his father, brought Yehoseph to his sense, and his illicit passions departed from him. Lord have mercy, this woman was looking so good. Look, he almost lost himself. He was like, almost like, oh my God. He almost lost it, y'all. Boy, almost lost it. He almost lost it, but thank heaven for the image that came to him to knock the sense. Wait, hold it. Okay. And that illicit passion, it departed from him. And astonished, girl was upset, astonished at the swift change in his countenance. Zuleika said, my friend and true love, why art thou so affrighted that thou art near to swooning? What happened? What happened? What happened? Yehoseph, I see my father. Zuleika, where is he? Where is he? Why? There is none in this house. She was ready, man. She was ready. She was ready. I can just imagine. She was all revved up. You know how you can get revved up sometime when you really want it. You're right there. You know what I'm saying? You know, and come on now. Yehoseph, thou belongest to a people that is like unto the ass. It perceiveth nothing. He said, but I belong to those who can see things. Yehoseph fled forth. My man got up. I don't know whether he got up from the chair. I don't know whether he was sitting on the bed, or I don't know whether he was on the floor, on the table, or what. Excuse me, it's just my imagination going with me, because it said that he was almost there. So almost there, I don't know what that means. But anyways, hearts was beating. Hearts was pumping fast. That's all I can imagine anyway. You know how it is. You know how it is. But don't act like you don't know how it is when you get there. You know what I'm saying? The heart started racing and everything, and stuff started rising, and all kind of feelings started going everywhere. So anyway, boy, look, the only way he could escape, he had to run before he make a mistake. For that passion or that illicit whatever rise up again. Boy had to run to escape. from that feeling. So he got up and he ran, he fled away from the house of his mistress, the same house in which aforetime wonders had been done for Sarah, kept a captive there by Pharaoh. But hardly was he outside when the sinful passions again, do you hear this? No sooner than he was outside when the sinful passions again overwhelmed him. And he returned back to Zelucca's chamber. Do you hear that? Wait a minute. Hold on here. Hold on here. I got to back this thing up. Wait a minute. When we read this, he was in his office. He was at his work desk. This said that he went back to her chamber. So that means that my man had done raised up his passion and he left his workplace and went to Zelucca's chamber. At least I assume that it said he went back to her chamber. So that means he came from his chamber to go back to, you have to come from a chamber to say you went back to a chamber. So you mean he was in her bedroom? Lord have mercy. I can only imagine. So it said, and he returned to Zelucca's chamber. It said, then the Most High appeared unto him, holding the Eben Shetiyah, Eben Shetiyah, holding the Eben Shetiyah in his hand, and said to him, if thou touchest her, well, maybe he didn't touch her then. He said, if thou touchest her, she was a foreign woman. She was prohibited. The Most High said, if thou touchest her, I will cast away this stone upon which the earth is founded, and the world will fall to ruin. Sobered again. The boy sobered up again. And Yehoseph started to escape from his mistress. So that means the boy got up and he ran again. She probably thought he was going crazy, thinking, I almost got it. I almost got this stuff. But Zelucca, she caught him by his garment and she said, as the king liveth, if thou wilt not fulfill my wish, then thou must die. And while she spoke thus, she drew a sword with her free hand from under her dress, and pressing it against Yehoseph's throat, she said, do as I bid thee, or thou diest. She wanted that stuff bad. Now, you know, when you ready to kill somebody because you want sex that bad, that you willing to take a knife and kill somebody. If they don't give it to you, you're going to threaten them with a knife to their throat and say, if you don't give me this stuff, you're going to die. She was desperate. And it said, Yehoseph ran out, leaving a piece of his garment in her hand, in the hands of Zelucca, as he wrenched himself loose from the grip of the woman with a quick, energetic motion. Honey, look. The way this story almost sounds like that she turned to some kind of woman, or whatever, thought she was wrestling with a goddamn man. Lord Jesus Christ. And I didn't cuss. I said, goddamn man. All right. Lord Jesus, have mercy. Wow, Lord, the man, oh my goodness. He was going through. He was going through, honey. He was going through. It says, Zelucca's passion for Yehoseph was so violent that in lieu of its owner, whom she could not ascend in subduing to her will, she kissed, oh my God, it says she kissed and caressed the fragment of cloth left in her hand. At the same time, she was not slow to perceive the danger into which she had put herself, for she feared Yehoseph might possibly betray her conduct, and she considered ways and means of obviating the consequences of her folly. Now, let me tell you something. How she loved this man and how she wanted to get with this man to the point that she done tore his garment. And she tore the garment and she suddenly began to caress the garment and the fragrance of clothes. And see, I know that picture right there, that's real. That's real. Because I remember when I was so much attracted to this man, and I wasn't about to give him nothing, but I was so attracted to him. I was so attracted, I was so allured by him, till when I saw the man and I hugged the man's perfume would get in my clothes. Oh my God. And he used to wear that Egyptian musk and all other sorts of colognes. And when I would get to my house and my clothes would be hanging up in my closet, I would just go and I would take my nose to the clothes and I would inhale and I would say, oh my goodness. And it was just almost as if the man was there. So I know exactly what she was feeling. And she caressed that piece of fabric and she smelled the fragrance from the clothes and how she could imagine being there with that man. Excuse me for all the emotions that I'm just displaying right now, excuse me. But I know some of y'all have displayed some of those emotions as well. So I'm going to move on anyway. So she feared Yehoseph might possibly betray her conduct. And she considered ways and means of evading the consequences of her folly. Now, meanwhile, her friends returned from the Nile festival, and they came to visit her and inquire after her health. And they found her looking wretchedly ill on account of the excitement she had passed through and the anxiety she was in. You understand? She confessed to the woman what had happened with Yehoseph, and they advised her to accuse him of immorality before her husband, and then he would be thrown into prison. And Zeluaka accepted their advice, and she begged her visitors to support her false charges by also lodging complaints against Yehoseph that he had been annoying them with improper proposals. Have you ever had that happen to you before? Yeah, I had an employer who lied on me because he was trying to subdue me, seduce me. And he would come in and he would ride the copy machine. And he would look at me and let me know that he wanted to get some, but you know what I'm saying? I didn't give in. So he kind of ratted on me with lies to the employer that I was working for, you know, but unfortunately it didn't work. But since they was business partners, the employer that I was working for, he got rid of me because they were business partners, you know. But anyway, it'd be like that sometimes, you know. People try to seduce you and everything else, and you get fired, and not them. But anyway, we're going to go ahead on. So it says, but Zeluaka did not depend entirely upon the assistance of her friends. She planned a ruse. Besides, to be sure of convincing her husband of Yehoseph's guilt, she laid aside her rich robes of state. She put on her ordinary clothes. She didn't want him to know what she was looking like. And she took to her sick bed in pretense, in which she had been lying when the people left to go to the festival. So she took Yehoseph's torn garment, then she laid it out next to her. Then she sent a little boy to summon some of the men of her house, and she And to them she told the lie, the tale of Yehosaph's alleged outrage, saying, see that Hebrew slave whom your master has brought in unto my house, and who attempted to do violence to me today. You had scarcely gone away to the festival when he entered the house, and making sure that no one was here, he tried to force me to yield to his lustful desires. But I grabbed his clothes and I tore them. And I cried with a loud voice. When he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, he was seized with fear and he fled and he got him out, but he left his garment by me. And the men of her house spake not a word, but in a rage against Yehoseph, they went to their master and they reported to him what had come to pass. In the meantime, the husband of Zelucca's friends had also spoken to Potiphar at the instigation of their wives and complained of his slave that he molested them. You're no good, Zelucca, no good, lying somebody. So anyway, Potiphar hastened home. Do you see this man? His slave done tried to rape his wife, done tried to molest his wife, done tried to take, and on top of that, he molesting all the women. Let me hurry up and get home. I'm gonna do something to him. So anyway, so Potiphar, he hastened home and he found his wife in low spirits. And though the cause of her dejections was charging at not having succeeded in winning Yehosheph's love, she pretended that it was anger at the immoral conduct of the slave. She accused him in the following words: O husband, mayest thou not live a day longer, if thou doest not punish the wicked slave that thou hast deserved to the desire to defile thy bed, that had not kept in mind who he was when he came to our house, to demean himself with modesty, nor hath he been mindful of the favors he hath received from thy bounty. He did lay a private design to abuse thy wife. And this is the time of observing of the festival. At this time, when you go to observe the festival, when thou would it be absent? These words she spoke at the moment of conjugal intimacy. This low down chick, while she having sexual relationship with her husband, she gonna say this mess in his ear while she getting off, or he getting off, whatever. But anyway, excuse me. While she having intimacy with Potiphar, when she was certain of exerting an influence on her husband while having sexual intercourse, probably at the height of an orgasm, excuse me. And Potiphar gave credence to her words, and he had Yehoseph flogged unmercifully. While she cried, while the cruel blows fell upon him, he cried to the Most High, O Creator, thou knowest that I am innocent of these things, and why should I die today on account of a false accusation by the hands of these uncircumcised, impious men? Yahweh opened the mouth of Zelucca's child, a babe of but 11 months. And he spoke to the men that were beating Yehoseph, saying, what is your quarrel with this man? Why do you inflict such evil upon him? Lies my mother doeth speak, and deceit is what her mouth uttereth. This is the true tale of that which did happen. And the child proceeded to tell all that had passed, how Zelucca had tried first to persuade Yehoseph to act wickedly, and then had tried to force him to do her will. The people listened in great amazement. But the report finished. The child spake no words as before. Abashed by the speech of his own infant son, Potiphar commanded his bailiffs to leave off from chastising Yehoseph. And the matter was brought into court, where priests sat as judges. Yehoseph protested his innocence and related all that had happened according to the truth. But Potiphar repeated the account his wife had given him. The judges ordered the garment of Yehoseph to be brought, which Zelicah had in her possession, and they examined the tear therein. It turns out to be on the front part of the mantle, and they came to the conclusion that Zelicah had tried to hold him fast and had foiled in her attempt by Yehoseph, against whom she was not lodging a triumph of charge. They decided that Yehoseph had not incurred the death penalty, but they condemned him to incarceration because he was the cause of the stain upon Zelicah's fair name. Potiphar himself was convinced of Yehoseph's innocence, and when he cast him into prison, he said to him, I know that thou art not guilty of so vile a crime, but I must put thee in endurance, lest a taint cling to my children. Ain't that a trip? Okay. Yehoseph in prison. By way of punishment, listen to this, by way of punishment for having transduced his 10 brethren before his father, Yehoseph had to languish for 10 years in the prison to which the wails of transducers had in turn condemned him. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Let us think about that. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And whatsoever our oppressors soweth, that or their generation shall they also reap. Okay? And it goes for us too. So it says, but on the other hand, as he had sanctified the name of the Most High before the world by his chastity and his steadfastness, he was rewarded. The letter he, H-E, which occurs twice in the name of the Most High, was added to his name. He had been called Yehoseph, but now he was called also Yehoseph. Though he was bound in prison, Yehoseph was not yet safe from the machinations of his mistress, whose passions for him was in no wise lessened by his imprisonment. In truth, it was she that had induced her husband to change his intentions regarding Yehoseph. She urged him to imprison the slave rather than kill him, for she hoped that as a prisoner, he could be made amenable to her wishes more easily. Whew, Lord have mercy. She was a trip. She spake to her husband, saying, do not destroy thy property. Cast the slave in prison and keep him there until thou canst sell him and receive back the money thou didst pay out for him. Thus she had the opportunity of visiting him in his cell and trying to persuade him to do her will. Now, when I think about she had the opportunity to visit him in his cell. Now, let me think about this for a minute. And it said she visited him in his cell. And while he was in his cell, she was able to persuade him. So let me just assume, I'm making an assumption. That cell must have been closed off where nobody could hear what she was saying, because I'm pretty sure if the cell was open where people could see and hear her trying to seduce him while he's yet in prison, I'm pretty sure that would have been noised abroad. So apparently his cell, maybe he must have been in a room with the door, you close the door, or either she made sure that no guard or anybody was around or whatever, so she can continue to try to seduce him while she done reduced him to prison. Okay, all right, now she was a bad mama jama. I'm trying to tell you the things people would do for some crazy type of love. Come on now. It says, she would say, this and that outrage have I executed against thee. But as thou livest, I will put yet other outrages upon thee if you do not obey me. If you, I'm saying this, if you do not have sex with me, I'm going to cause other things to happen to you. But Yehoseph replied, the Most High executeth judgment for the oppressed. Zeluaka, I will push matters so far that all men will hate thee. Yehoseph, the Most High loveth the righteous. Zeluaka, I will sail thee into a strange land. Yehoseph, the Most High preserveth the stranger. Then she would resort to enticements in order to obtain her desire. She would promise to release him from prison if he would but grant her wish. But he would say, better it is to remain here than be with thee and commit a trespass against the Most High. These visits to Yehoseph in prison, Zeluaka continued for a long time. But when finally she saw that all her hopes were vain, she let him alone. As the mistress persisted in her love for Yehoseph, so his master, her husband, could not separate himself from his favorite slave. Though a prisoner, Yehoseph continued to minister to the needs of Potiphar, and he received permission from the keeper of the prison to spend some of his time in the master's house. In many other ways, the jailer showed himself kindly disposed toward Yehoseph. Seeing the youth, zeal, and consciousness in executing the tasks laid upon him, and under the spell of his enchanting beauty. Do you hear that? Even the jailer was enchanted and under the spell of his beauty. So don't let nobody tell you that this boy was ugly. He was not ugly in any way. This man was fine as wine. He was fine. He must have been finer than anything in Egypt. Okay? That even the jailer was overcome by his beauty. Okay? Now look at this as I find my place. Seeing the youth's zeal and conscientiousness in executing his task laid upon him and under the spell of his enchanting beauty. I want to say that again. The jail keeper He made prison life as easy as possible for his charge. He even ordered better dishes for him than the common prison fares. And he found it superfluous caution to keep watch over Yehoseph, for he could see no wrong in him. And he observed that the Most High was with him in good days and in the bad. Now, you know, the boy had to be so alluring that he found favor with all men because of his beauty. And not only his beauty, but his ways, his piousness. He even, we're talking about the prison keeper, the jail keeper. He even appointed him to be the overseer of the prison. Check this out. And as Yehoseph commanded, so the other prisoners were obliged to do. Now I'm telling you, not only did the Most High raise Yehoseph up in his master's house, in his master's kingdom, but he also raised him up in the prison. He raised him up so he outshined the people in the prison. And his beauty was so noticeable. Everybody in the prison had to take note of him. They couldn't help it. His beauty was enchanting. For a long time, the people talked of nothing but the accusations raised against Yehoseph by his mistress. In order to divert the attention of the public from him, the Most High ordained that 2 high officers, the chief butler and the chief baker, should offend their lord, the king of Egypt. And they were put in ward in the house of the captain of the guards. Now the people ceased their talk about Yehoseph and spoke only about the scandal going on at court, about the baker, and the butler. Okay? You know how it is. You know how y'all like to keep up a lot of gossip about what's going on. It says the charges laid at the door of the noble prisoners were that they had attempted to do violence to the daughters of Pharaoh, and they had conspired to poison the king himself. Besides, they had shown themselves derelict in their services. In the wine the chief butler had handed to the king to drink, a fly had been discovered, and the bread set upon the royal board by the chef baker contained a little pebble. Oh, Lord Jesus Christ. On account of all these transgressions, they were condemned to death by Pharaoh. Lord have mercy, that was so harsh. I'm trying to tell you. It says, but for the sake of Yehoseph, it was ordained by divine providence that the king should first detain them in prison before he ordered their execution. The Most High had enkindled the wrath of the king against his servants only that the wish of Yehoseph for liberty might be fulfilled, for they were the instruments of his deliverance from prison. And though they were doomed to death, yet in consideration of the exalted office they had held at court, the keeper of the prison accorded them privileges. As, for instance, a man was detailed to wait upon them, and the one appointed thereto was Yehoseph. You know what? I want you to check this out. The Father, again, I say, he works in mysterious ways. And let me tell you something. Although our oppressors are doing all types of things in this land against us, they don't know what works the Most High is doing among them that will fall in our favor. So keep on doing what you're doing, because as you're doing what you're doing, the Father is setting up what he's doing so that when the time cometh, he will work according to our favor, while he moved men up in ranks among you for the purpose of helping us. And guess what? You will never know who those men are. Because our Father, Yahweh, he works in mysterious ways that you can't even recognize. Now, let me go on. The chief butler and the chief baker had been confined in prison 10 whole years. 10 whole years is a long time to get to know someone. And with the 10 years that they were in prison, believe me, they really had great time to know who Yehoseph was. When they dreamed a dream, both of them, but as for the interpretation, each dreamed only that of the other one's dream. In the morning, when Yehoseph brought them the water for washing, he found them sad, depressed in spirits. And in the matter of the sages, he asked them why they looked different on that day from other days. They said unto him, we have dreamed a dream this night. And our two dreams, they resemble each other in certain particulars. And there is none that can interpret them. And Yehoseph said unto them, the Most High granteth understanding to man to interpret dreams. Tell them me, I pray you. It was as a reward for the ascribing greatness and credit to him unto whom it belongeth, that Yehoseph later attained to his lofty position. The Father even is willing to sacrifice other men in order that he raise his people up from the dunghill, in order that he raise his people up from oppression. He said, I gave Egypt for a ransom. When we were in slavery and we had did wrongs, the people who took the punishment in our place were the Egyptians, because the Egyptians also were idol worshipers. So the Most High gave Egypt for a ransom. He gave them in our place. He put the punishment upon them, and he redeemed us from the land of Egypt, the land of the Egyptians. And in the same way, he gave Egypt for a ransom and redeemed us. Is the same way that he will give up the nations and those in America that took us into slavery. He will give them up as a ransom, and he will redeem us out of this land. And we shall exodus out of here, whether you like it or not. And I shall continue on in my reading. Now, let's go. It said, and they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream this night. And our two dreams resemble each other in certain particulars. And there is none that can interpret them. And Yehoseph said unto them, the Most High granted understanding to man to interpret dreams. Tell them, me, I pray you. It was as a reward for ascribing greatness and credit to him unto whom it belongeth, that Yehoseph later attained to his lofty position. The chief butler proceeded to tell his dream. In my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine there were branches. And it was as though it budded, and its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. And I took the grapes, and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup. And I gave the cup unto Pharaoh's hands. The chief butler was not aware that his dream contained a prophecy regarding the future of Israel. But Yehoseph discerned the recondite meaning, and he interpreted the dream thus. The three branches are the three fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose descendants in Egypt will be redeemed by three leaders, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to continue. Let me let you know one thing. The Creator, the Most High, not only uses men as his prophets, he also uses women as his prophetess, as his leaders. Don't forget it. Because you were not delivered all of the books, you don't know that the Most High had women who were leaders, women who were prophetess, even in that day, and women who the people also looked up to. So don't get it twisted. Not only do our Father, the Father of Israel, uses men, he also uses women. Now I shall continue. It says, and the cup given unto the hand of Pharaoh is the cup of wrath that he will have to drain in the land. The interpretation of the dream Yehoseph kept for himself, and he told the chief butler nothing thereof, but out of gratitude for the glad tidings of the deliverance of Israel from the bondage of Egypt, he gave him a favorable interpretation of his dream and begged him to have him in his remembrance when it should be well with him and liberate him from the dungeons in which he was confined. Now, when the chief baker heard the interpretation of the butler's dream, he knew that Yehoseph had divined its meaning correctly. Now, he knew that. For in his own, he had seen the interpretation of his friend's dream. And he proceeded to tell Yehoseph what he had dreamed in the night. I also was in my dream, and I beheld 3 baskets of white bread were on my head. And in the uppermost basket, there was of all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the baskets upon my head. Also, this dream conveyed a prophecy regarding the future of Israel. The 3 baskets are the 3 kingdoms to which Israel will be made subject. 4 kingdoms. Also, there are 4 kingdoms. But the first 3 kingdoms, Babylon, Media, and Greece. And the uppermost basket indicates the wicked rule of Rome. And Rome is the eagle. And the wicked rule of Rome, and the eagle represents the United States. The eagle also represents Europe. The eagle also represents the UK. And also the one that is riding with Rome is Ishmael, the Arabs who were confederate with Rome. And a little bit that you don't also know about Rome is the place where Esau also set up his kingdom. Also, he set himself up in the land of Uz. Okay? And they are confederate. And you have Sephardim, who are the descendants of Esau, who were joined together with Ishmael's seed. So you had the seed of Ishmael. You had the seed of Esau's descendants. And you had the Europeans who were in confederacy with Rome, that they ruled almost together. And they signed many contracts, agreements together in regards to us, who they brought here in the slave ships. Let me tell you something. And so we are talking about this. When we are talking about the interpretation of the dreams that Yehoseph dreamed, and Rome, of whose hands we are still in, is the last kingdom to rule. And it is also the last kingdom that shall fall. Believe it or not. Now, I shall continue. Again, Yehoseph kept the prophecy a secret. And to the chief baker, he gave only the interpretation that had reference to his person, but it was unfavorable to him, because through his dream, Yehoseph had been made acquainted with the suffering of Israel, that Israel would have to undergo, and that we are talking about going into bondage, being turned into slaves, being carried away on ships to the north, and being transported to all of the nations, and to be oppressed by oppressors, and to be trodden underfoot, and to be put into yokes and chains of bondage, and to be oppressed in Egypt, and to be oppressed in the north, in the land of darkness, in chains. And we are still here. But in time to come, we're going to exodus out of here, no matter if you like it or not. It shall surely come to pass. Now, and I shall continue on. Now, and all came to pass, as Yehoseph has said, on the third day, the day whereon he explained the meaning of their dreams to the two distinguished prisoners, a son was born to Pharaoh. And to celebrate the joyous event, the king arranged a feast for his princes and servants that was to last 8 days. Now, you know that's some kind of feast, man. You know you got to really have it going on to arrange a feast for 8 days. Woo! That's a nice long time to arrange a feast for having a wonderful son, or a son born to the Pharaoh of Egypt. Now, 8 days. He invited them and all the people to his table. and he entertained them with royal splendor. The feast had its beginnings on the third day after the birth of the child. And on that occasion, the chief butler was restored in honor to his butlership, and the chief baker was hanged. But Pharaoh's counselors had discovered that it was not the butler's fault that the fly had dropped into the king's wine. But the baker had been guilty of carelessness in allowing the pebble to get into the bread. Likewise, it appeared that the butler had had no part in the conspiracy to poison the king, while the baker was revealed as one of the plotters, and he had to expiate his crime with his life. Now, Pharaoh's dreams. And in the last days, they shall dream dreams. And in the last days, the young women shall dream dreams. In the last days, your young men shall dream dreams. In the last days, your old men shall see visions. And it too shall indeed come to pass. Now, properly speaking, Yehoseph should have gone out free from his dungeon on the same day as the butler. He had been there 10 years by that time and had made amends for the slander he had uttered against his 10 brethren. However, he remained in prison 2 years longer. Blessed is the man that trusteth in the Most High, and whose hope is in the Creator. But Yehoseph had put his confidence in flesh and blood. He had prayed the chief butler to have him in remembrance, when it should have be well with him, and make mention of him unto Pharaoh. And the chief butler forgot his promise. And therefore, Yehoseph had to stay in prison 2 years more than the years originally allotted to him there. He put his trust in men. He didn't put his trust in the Most High to bring him out. And you see what happened. He had to do time. He had to do 2 more years. So it said, the butler had not forgotten him intentionally, but it was ordained by the Most High that his memory should fail him when he would say to himself, if thus it so happens, I will remember the case of Yehoseph. The condition he had imagined was sure to be revealed. Or if he made a knot as a reminder, a Malachim came and undid the knot, and Yehoseph did not enter his mind. Now, you know that was a work of the Most High, because he did not put his trust in him. He put his trust in men, okay? But the Most High setteth an end to darkness, and Yehosaph's liberation was not delayed by a single moment beyond the time decreed for it. The Most High said, thou, O butler, thou didst forget Yehoseph, but I did not. And he caused Pharaoh to dream a dream that was the occasion for Yehosaph's release. Okay, you got me? All right. It was the occasion for his release. Okay, now let me move on. Let me find where I was right now. It says, in the dream, Pharaoh saw 7 kine, well-favored and fat-fleshed, come up out of the Nile. And they all together grazed peacefully on the brink of the river. In years when the harvest is abundant, friendships reign among men and love and brotherly harmony. And these 7 fat kine stood for 7 such prosperous years. After the fat kine, 7 more came up out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and each had her back turned to the other. For when distress prevails, one man turns away from the other. For a brief space, Pharaoh awoke, and when he went to sleep again, he dreamed a second dream about 7 rank and good corn, and good ears of corn, and 7 ears that were thin and blasted with the east wind. They withered, the withered corn swallowing the full corn. He awoke at once, and it was morning, and the dreams dreamed in the morning are the ones that come true. This was not the first time Pharaoh had had these dreams. They had visited him every night during a period of 2 years, and he had forgotten them invariably in the morning. This was the first time he remembered them, for the day had arrived for Yehoseph to come forth from his prison house. Yehoseph's heart beat violently when he called his dreams to mind on awakening. Okay, let's go on with that. I got to turn this way because my leg is getting a little bit tired. Okay, a little bit tired. So I'm going to sit like this a little bit. Got to get relaxed all up in this chair here. Okay. So it said Pharaoh's heart beat violently. I've had that happen to me. I've had dreams and woke up and my heart was racing. It was beating violently. And I've had dreams where I was hit in the head and woke up and my head was in severe pain. Okay. So it went from the dream to my head, I'm telling you. But he was in a race. His heart was panicking. His heart was beating. And I've been there before, so I do understand. It says, especially the second one about the ears of corn, okay? Disquieted him. He reflected that whatever has a mouth can eat. And therefore, the dream of the 7 lean kine that ate up the 7 fat kine did not appear strange to him. But the ears of corn that swallowed up other ears of corn, troubled his spirit. He therefore called for all the wise men of his land, and they endeavored in vain to find a satisfactory interpretation. They explained that the 7 fat kine meant 7 daughters to be born unto Pharaoh, and that the 7 lean kine, that he would bury 7 daughters. Does that make sense? The rank ears of corn meant that Pharaoh would conquer 7 countries, and the blasted corn, that 7 provinces would rebel against him. About the ears of corn, they did not all agree. Some thought the good ears stood for 7 cities to be built by Pharaoh, and the 7 wilted ears indicated that these same cities would be destroyed at the end of his reign. Okay. Sagacious as he was, Pharaoh knew that none of these explanations hit the nail on the head. He issued a decree summoning all the interpreters of dreams to appear before him on pain of death. And he held out great rewards and distinctions to the one who should succeed in finding the true meaning of his dreams. In obedience to his, oh Lord, excuse me. In obedience to his summons, all the wise men appeared, the magicians and the sacred scribes that were in Mizraim, the city of Egypt, as well as those from Goshen, Ramses, Zoan, and the whole country of Egypt. And with them came the prince, officers, and servants of the king from all the cities of the land. Hold on, folks. That smell of that cayenne pepper is really getting to me. So just hold on a moment. Woo, man, I'm telling you, sometime when you smell that cayenne pepper, woo, I tell you, it can really make you sneeze. So look, let me tell you something. If you ever need to think about sneezing, put some cayenne pepper around, and I guarantee you, you probably sneeze, have a runny nose, and everything else. I tell you, because cayenne pepper is powerful. And also, did you know that cayenne pepper was good for the blood? And yes, I did get off the subject, but I'm getting ready to get back on and talk about this story some more. Okay, excuse the interruption, but you know, it's like what I do. I like to interrupt the story every now and then. So anyway, sagacious as he was. Now let me get here. Sagacious as he was, Pharaoh knew that none of these explanations hit the head on the nail. So anyway, he held out great rewards and distinctions to the one who should succeed in finding the true meaning of his dreams. In obedience to his summons, all the wise men appeared, the magicians and the sacred scribes that were in Mizraim, the city of Egypt, as well as those from Goshen, Ramses, Zoan, and the whole country of Egypt. And with them came the prince, officers, and servants of the king from all the cities of the land. Ooh, my goodness, I'm not a king. And I don't have a kingdom. And I don't have a throne. But yet my imagination baffles me as I sit here and I pretend to look out over the palace court, and see it arrayed with men out of every place coming to interpret a dream for the Pharaoh of Egypt. Can you imagine? I can imagine all of the wonderful raiment and costly array and how they were looking and so anxious to interpret the dream. Anyway, let me go ahead on here. It says, to all these, the king narrated his dream, but none could interpret them to his satisfaction. Some said that the 7 fat kine were the 7 legitimate kings that would rule over Egypt. And the 7 lean kine betokened 7 princes that would rise up against these 7 kings and exterminate them. The 7 good ears of corn were the 7 superior princes of Egypt that would engage in war for their overlords and would be defeated by as many insignificant princes or prince who were betokened by the 7 blasted ears. Another interpretation was that the 7 fat kine were the 7 fortified cities of Egypt at some future time to fall into the hands of 7 Canaanitish nations who were foreshadowed in the 7 lean kine. According to the interpretation, the second dream supplemented the first. It meant that the descendants of Pharaoh would reign sovereign authorities over Egypt, at a subsequent period and would subdue the 7 Canaanitish nations as well. There was a third interpretation given by some. The 7 fat kine are 7 women whom Pharaoh would take to wife, but they would die during his lifetime. Their loss being indicated by the 7 lean kine. Furthermore, Pharaoh would have 14 sons, and the 7 strong ones would be conquered by the 7 weaklings. As the blasted ears of corn in his dream had swallowed up the rank ears of corn. And a fourth, these wilt have been sons, O Pharaoh. These are the 7 fat kine. These sons of thine will be killed by the 7 powerful rebellious prince. But then 7 minor prince will come, and they will kill the 7 rebels, avenge the descendants, and restore the dominion to thy family. Lord have mercy. Ooh, Lord, I would have been tired. It looked like didn't nobody know what the heck they were talking about. The king was as little pleased with these interpretations as with the others, which he had heard before. And in his wrath, he ordered the wise men, the magicians, and the scribes of Egypt to be killed, and the hangman made ready to execute the royal decree. However, Merad, Pharaoh's chief butler, took fright, seeing that the king was so vexed at his failure to secure an interpretation of his dreams that he was on the point of giving up the ghost. He was alarmed about the king's death, okay? He's alarmed about the king's death. For it was doubtful whether the successor to the throne would retain him in office. I'm going to go on pause for a minute, just a minute, and I'll be back. Hello, I had to pause for the cause, but now I am back. Hopefully I remember my place. My place here. Okay. Excuse me, but I must find my place. I had to go and take care of something, and so I'm back. Well, sometime when you forget your place, that means you have to repeat it. So hopefully you're not upset that I'm going to repeat what I just said a few minutes ago. Now, the chief butler was concerned, and he was alarmed about the king's death, because he saw that the king looked as if he might give up the ghost. So, for it was doubtful whether the successor to the throne would retain him in office. Honey, so you know what? That will put something on your mind. He resolved to do all in his power to keep Pharaoh alive. Therefore, he stepped before him and he spake, saying, I do remember 2 faults of mine this day. I showed myself ungrateful to Yehoseph, in that I did not bring his requests before thee. And also I saw thee in distress by reason of thy dream, without letting thee know that Yehoseph can interpret dreams. When it pleased the Most High to make Pharaoh wroth with his servants, the king put me in ward in the house of the captain of the guards, me and the chief baker. And with us there was a simple young man, one of the despised race of the Hebrews, slave to the captain of the guard, and he interpreted dreams to us. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Therefore, O king, stay the hand of the hangman. Let them not execute the Egyptians. The slave I speak of is still in the dungeon, And if the king will consent to summon him hither, he will surely interpret thy dream. I want to make emphasis on the statement that he made here about the Hebrews. He said, let's go back here. He said, and with us there was a simple young man, one of the despised race of the Hebrews. So as we were despised then, because of the most mighty one that we served, and we did not serve the idol gods of those of other nations. As we were despised then, so are we despised even now. And I shall go back to my reading. He said, the slave I speak of is still in the dungeon. And if the king will consent to summon him hither, he will surely interpret your dream. Yehoseph before Pharaoh. Accused are the wicked that never do a wholly good deed. The chief butler described Yehoseph contemptuously. Did you understand that? He described the man that told him the dream of his freedom contemptuously, because he told him the young, simple young man of that despised race of the Hebrews. Okay? So we're going to look at that, and we're going to read this here, right here again. It says, the accursed are the wicked that never do a wholly good deed. The scripture here, or the text here, was talking about the young man who took so long to get his word to the king about Yehoseph, the chief butler. It said the chief butler described Yehoseph contemptuously as a slave, in order that it might be impossible for him to occupy a distinguished place at court. Do you understand that? He looked at him like a slave of a despised race. He didn't even want him to get no kind of position. He wanted him to probably put the man, make him get on the floor or something, whatever. But he didn't want him to be distinguished. It said, for it was a law, check this out, like it was a law put into the laws of this United States, okay, against us. And it's still there today. Now, let me get back to the game, okay? Let me get back to this. It said, for it was a law upon the statute books of Egypt that a slave could never sit upon the throne as king, nor ever put his foot in the stirrup of a horse. Check that out. All right? All right. Now, let me tell you something. These ancient books are a playbook. Many of these practices and different things that are used upon us today, of how they handled us and how they treated us, and the laws and statutes and commandments that they put in place, came from these ancient texts of how our oppressors treated us. It's a playbook, and they are looking at the playbook, and they are dealing out these blows to us as well from the book, okay? From our books. Okay, let me move right along. And it said, Pharaoh revoked the edict of death that he had issued against the wise men of Egypt. And he sent and called Yehoseph. He impressed care upon his messengers. They were not to excite and confuse Yehoseph and render him unfit to interpret the king's dream correctly. They brought him hastily out of the dungeon, but first Yehoseph, out of the respect for the king, shaved himself and put on fresh raiments, and Malachim, an angel, brought him from paradise. And then he came in unto Pharaoh. The king was sitting upon the royal throne, arrayed in princely garments, clad with a golden ephod upon his breast. And the fine gold of the ephod sparkled, and the carbuncles and the rubies and the emeralds flamed like a torch. And all the precious stones set upon the king's head flashed at the appearance of the king. The throne upon which he sat was covered with gold and silver and with onyx stones, and it had 70 steps. If a prince or other distinguished person came to have an audience with the king, it was the custom for him to advance and mount to the 31st step of the throne. And the king would descend 36 steps and speak to him. But if one of the people came to have speech with the king, he ascended only to the 3rd step, and the king would come down 4 steps from his seat and address him thence. It was also the custom that one who knew all the 70 languages ascended the 70 steps of the throne to the top. But if a man knew some of the 70 languages, but if the man knew only some of the 70 languages, he was permitted to ascend as many steps as he knew languages, whether they were many or few. And another custom of the Egyptian was that none could reign over them unless he was master of all the 70 languages of the earth, as the Most High had divided the peoples of the earth into 70 nations at the destruction of the Tower of Babel under Nimrod's kingdom. Now, when Yehoseph came before the king, he bowed down to the ground and he ascended to the 3rd step, while the king sat upon the 4th from the top and spake with Yehoseph, saying, O young man, my servant beareth witness concerning thee, that thou art the best and the most discerning person I can consult with. I pray thee, vouchsafe unto me the same favors which thou didst bestow on the servants of mine, and tell me what events they are which the vision of my dream force show. I desire thee to suppress not out of fear, nor shalt thou flatter me with lying words or with words that please me. Tell me the truth, though it be sad and alarming. Now, Yehoseph asked the king first, whence he knew that the interpretation given by the wise men of his country was not true. And Pharaoh replied, I saw the dream and its interpretation together, and therefore they cannot make a fool of me. In his modesty, Yehoseph denied that he was an adept at interpreting dreams. He said, "It is not in me. It is in the hand of the Most High. And if it be the wish of the Most High, he will permit me to announce tidings of peace to the Pharaoh." And for such modesty, he was rewarded by sovereignty over Egypt. For the Most High doeth honor them that honoreth him. Thus also was Daniel rewarded for his speech to Nebuchadnezzar. All right, and I shall turn the page. There is a creator in heaven that revealeth secrets. It is. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but to the intent that the interpretation may be made known to the king, and that thou mayest know the thoughts of thine heart. Then Pharaoh began to tell his dream, only he omitted some points and narrated others inaccurately in order that he might test the vaunted powers of Yehoseph. But the youth corrected him and pieced the dreams together exactly as they had visited Pharaoh in the night, and the king was greatly amazed. Yehoseph was able to accomplish this feat because he had dreamed the same dream as Pharaoh at the same time as he. Thereupon, Pharaoh retold the dream with all details and circumstances, and precisely as he had seen them in his sleep, except that he left out the word Nile in the description of the seven lean kine, because this river was worshipped by the Egyptians, as he hesitated to say that aught that is evil had come from his gods. Now Yehoseph proceeded to give the king the true interpretation of the two dreams. They were both a revelation concerning the 7 good years impeding and the 7 years of famine to follow them. In reality, it had been the purpose of the Most High to bring a famine of 42 years duration upon Egypt, but only 2 years of this distressful period were inflicted upon the land for the sake of the blessing of Jacob when he came to Egypt in the 2nd year of the famine. The other 42 fell upon the land at the time of the prophet Ezekiel. Yehoseph did more than merely interpret the dream. When the king gave voice to the doubts concerning the interpretation, he told him signs and tokens. He said, "Let this be a sign to thee that my words are true and my advice is excellent. Thy wife, who is sitting upon the birth stool at this moment, will bring forth a son, and thou wilt rejoice over him. But in the midst of thy joy, the said tidings will be told thee of the death of thine older son, who was born unto thee but 2 years ago. And thou must needs find consolation for the loss of the one in the birth of the other." Scarcely had Yehoseph withdrawn from the presence of the king when the report of the birth of the son was brought to Pharaoh, and soon after also the report of the death of his firstborn, who had suddenly dropped to the floor and passed away. Thereupon he sent for all the grandees of his realm and all the servants, and he spake to them, saying, you have heard the words of the Hebrew, and you have seen that the signs which he foretold were accomplished. And I also knew that he hath interpreted the dream true. Advise me now how the land may be saved from the ravages of the famine. Look hither and thither, whether you can find a man of wisdom and understanding, whom I may set over the land, for I am convinced that the land can be saved only if we heed the counsel of the Hebrew. The grandees and the prince admitted that safely could be secured only by adhering to the advice given by Yehoseph. And they proposed that the king, in his sagacity, choose a man whom he considered equal to the great task. Thereupon, Pharaoh said, if we transverse and search the earth from end to end, we could find none such as Yehoseph, a man in whom is the spirit of the Most High. If you think well thereof, I will set him over the land which he had saved by his wisdom. The astrologers, who were his counselors, demurred, saying, a slave, one whom his present owner hath acquired for 20 pieces of silver? Thou proposes to set over us as master? But Pharaoh maintained that Yehoseph was not only a freeborn man beyond the peradventure of a doubt, but also the scion of a noble family. However, the princes of Pharaoh were not silenced. They continued to give utterance to their opposition to Yehoseph, saying, doest thou not remember the immutable law of the Egyptians, that none may serve as king or as viceroy unless he speaks all 70 languages of men? And the Hebrew knows none but his own tongue. And how were it possible that a man should rule over us who cannot even speak the languages of the land? Send and have him fetched hither, and examine him in respect to all the things a ruler should know and have, and then decide as seemeth wise in thy sight. Okay. Don't you know kings, all kings have counselors? Okay. Pharaoh yielded. He promised to do as they wished, and he appointed the following day as the time for examining Yehoseph. Okay. Who had returned to his prison in the meantime. For on account of his wife, his master feared to have him stay in his house. During the night, Gabriel appeared unto Yehoseph and taught him all the 70 languages, and he acquired them quickly after the Malachim had changed his name. He acquired them quickly after the Malachim had changed his name from Joseph, or should I say Yehoseph, to Yehoseph. The next morning, when he came into the presence of Pharaoh and the nobles of the kingdom, and so much as he knew every one of the 70 languages, he mounted up all the steps of the royal throne until he reached the 70th, the highest upon which sat the king. And Pharaoh and his princes rejoiced that Yehoseph fulfilled all the requirements needed by one that was to rule over Egypt. The king said to Yehoseph, thou didst give me the counsel to look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt, that he may in his wisdom save the land from the famine. As the Most High has showed thee all this, and as thou art master of all the languages of the world, there is none so discreet and wise as thou. Thou shalt therefore be the second in the land to Pharaoh, and according unto thy words shall all my people go in and out. My prince and my servants shall receive thy monthly appendage from thee. Before thee the people shall prostrate themselves. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou, the ruler of Egypt. Oh boy, the thing is getting good now. Oh, isn't it good that he didn't bid to Potiphar's wife and engage with adulterous sex with her? Look at the glory that followed. Now Yehoseph reaped the harvest of his virtue, and according to the measure of his merits, the Most High granted him reward. The mouth that refused the kiss of unlawful passion and sin received the kiss of homage from the people. The neck that did not bow itself into sin was adorned with the gold chain that Pharaoh put upon it. The hands that did not touch sin wore the signet ring that Pharaoh took from his own hand and put it upon Yehoseph. The body that did not come in contact with sin was arrayed in vestures of bison, B-Y-S-S-U-S. The feet that made no step in the direction of sin reposed in the royal chariot. And the thoughts that kept themselves undefiled by sin were proclaimed as wisdom. Yehoseph was installed in his high position and invested with the insignia of his office. With solemn ceremony, the king took off his signet ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand and arrayed him in princely apparel and set a gold crown, and set a gold crown upon his head and laid a gold chain about his neck. Then he commanded his servants to make Yehoseph to ride in his second chariot, which went by the side of the chariot whereon sat the king. And he also made him to ride upon a great and a strong horse of the king's horses. And his servants conducted him through the streets of the city of Egypt. Musicians, no less than 1,000 striking cymbals and 1,000 blowing flutes and 5,000 men with drawn swords gleaming in the air formed the vanguard. 20,000 of king's grandees girt with golden embroidered leather belts marched at the right of Yehoseph, and as many at the left of him. The women and the maidens of the nobility looked out the windows to gaze upon Yehoseph's beauty. And they poured down chains upon him and rings and jewels that he might but direct his eyes toward them. Yet he did not look up. And as a reward, the Most High made him proof against the evil eye, nor has it ever had the power of inflicting harm upon any of his descendants. Servants of the king, preceding him and following him, burnt incense upon his path, and cassia and all manner of sweet spices, and shrewd myrrh and aloes wherever he went. 20 heralds walked before him, and they proclaimed, "This is the man whom the king had chosen to be the second after him. All affairs of state will he administer by him, and whomever resists his command or refuses to bow down to the ground before him, he will die the death of the rebel against the king and the king's deputy." Without delay, the people began to prostrate themselves, and they cried, "Long live the king, and long live the deputy of the king." And Yehoseph, looking down from his horse upon the people and their exaltations, exclaimed, his eyes directed heavenward, "The mighty one raised up the poor out of the dust and lifted up the needy from the dunghill. O mighty one of hosts, blessed is the man that trusteth in thee." After Yehoseph, accompanied by Pharaoh's officers and princes, had journeyed through the whole city of Egypt and viewed all there was therein, he returned to the king on the selfsame day. And the king gave him fields and vineyards as a present, Goshen, and also 3,000 talents of silver and 1,000 talents of gold and onyx stones and bdellium and many other costly things. The king commanded, moreover, that every Egyptian give Yehoseph a gift, else he would put them to death. A platform was erected in the open, wait a minute, let me go back over this again, in the open street, and there all deposited their presents. And among the things were many of gold and silver, as well as precious stones carried thither by the people, and also the grandees. For they saw that Yehoseph enjoyed the favor of the king. Furthermore, Yehoseph received 100 slaves from Pharaoh, and they were to do all his bidding. And he himself acquired many more, for he resided in a spacious palace. 3 years it took to build it. Special magnificence was lavished upon the halls of state, which was his audience chambers, and upon the throne fashioned of gold and silver and inlaid with precious stones, wherein there was a representation of the whole land of Egypt and of the river Nile. And as Yehoseph multiplied in riches, so he increased also in wisdom, for the Most High added to his wisdom all that all might love and honor him. Pharaoh called him Zephaniah. I will spell it for you. Zaphenath dash Paneah, meaning he who can reveal secret things with ease, and rejoiceth the heart of man therewith. Each letter of the name Zephaniah has a meaning too. And we shall go over it. And I will take the time to spell it out for you if need be, so that you can ponder on it. The first letter Zaddle, Zadde, stands for Zopheth, Zofeh, which stands for seer. Pe, Pe, for Poda, Podeh. It stands for redeemer. Nun, Nun, for Nabi, Nabi. It stands for prophet. To, Taw, for Tomek, Tomek, which stands for supporter. Pe, Pe, for Potiphar, Poter, stands for interpreter of dreams. Ain, Ain, for Arum, Arum. It stands for clever. Nun, Nun, is for Nabon, Nabon. It stands for discreet. And Het, Het, for Hakem, Hakam, which stands for wise. The name of Yehoseph's wife pointed to her history in the same way. Asenath, Asenath, was the daughter of Dinah and Hamor. Dinah and Hamor. But she was abandoned at the borders of Egypt, only that people might know who she was. Jacob engraved the story of her parentage and her birth upon a gold plate fastened around her neck. The day on which Asenath was exposed, Potiphar went walking with his servants near the city wall, and they heard the voice of a child. At the captain's bidding, they brought the baby to him. And when he read her history from the gold plate, he determined to adopt her. He took her home with him and raised her as his daughter. The Aleph, Alef, in Asenath stands for on, where Potiphar was priest, the priest of On, okay? The Shemek, Samek, for Setirah, Setirah, means hidden. For she was kept concealed on account of her extraordinary beauty. The Nun, for Nohemet, Nohemet, for she wept and entreated that she might be delivered from the house of the heathen Potiphar. And the To, for Tammah, Tammah, the perfect one, on account of her pious, perfect deeds. Now, let me continue on and read. Asenath had saved Yehosheph's life while she was still an infant in arms. When Yehoseph was accused of immoral conduct by Potiphar's wife and the other women, and his master was on the point of having him hanged, Asenath approached her father, her foster father, and she assured him under oath that the charges against Yehoseph was false. Then spake the Most High, as thou livest, because thou didst try to defend Yehoseph, thou shalt be the woman to bear the that he is appointed to beget. Asenath bore him 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, during the 7 years of plenty. For in the time of famine, Yehoseph refrained from all indulgence in the pleasures of life. They were bred in chastity and fear of the Most High by their father, and they were wise and well instructed in all knowledge and in the affairs of state, so that they became the favorites of the courts and were educated with the royal prince. Before the famine broke over the land, Yehoseph found an opportunity of rendering the king a great service. He equipped an army of 4,600 men, providing all of the soldiers with shields and spears and bucklers and helmets and slings. With this army, and aided by the servants and officers of the king, and by the people of Egypt, he carried on a war with Tarshish in the first year after his appointment as Viceroy. Okay? He led an army. Did he lead an army before? No. But the Most High put him in a position to lead a whole army. Who else led an army coming out of the land of the Medians? Moshe had led armies. He was a military man. He went from a shepherd boy to a man who was head over an army and led an army and won wars and was victorious. So don't ever think because some little somebody come up out of somewhere, you think that they are not appointed by the Most High to do his will by raising up an army. As I said before, who knows the mind of the Most High, who have lifted up shepherd boys who have become great kings. All right. The people of Tarshish had invaded the territories of the Ishmaelites and the latter. Few in number at that time, were sore pressed and applied to the king of Egypt for help against their enemies. At the head of the host of heroes, Yehoseph marched to the land of Havilah, where he was joined by the Ishmaelites. And with united forces, they fought against the people of Tarshish, routed them utterly, settled their land with the Ishmaelites, while the defeated men took refuge with their brethren in Yavan or Javan. Joseph and his army returned to Egypt, and not a man had they lost. Now let me share something, and I have to repeat this again. The Ishmaelites were related to the Pharaoh, or should I say the Pharaohs, because Ishmael's, should I say, grandfather was a Pharaoh. Remember that Ishmael's grandfather was a Pharaoh, that Ishmael's mother was the daughter of Pharaoh. The Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave his daughter to Abraham. He gave Hagar, the daughter of a king, to Abraham's wife, who was Sarah. This Yehoseph, who went to fight against Tarshish was fighting together with his cousins. He was related to Ishmael. Pharaoh of Egypt was related to Ishmael. They all were related. And we have to ask a question. Why were the Hebrews hated by the Egyptians and hated by Ishmael? Is it not because of the birthright? Okay. Now, let me continue on to do this and read this book here. Okay. Now, me and my forgetting where I am, child. I need to keep up. But anyway, it says, Asenath bore him 2 sons. Okay. Oh, let's get back to this fight. Okay. We're going to get on down to the fight. Joshua and his army returned to Egypt, and not a man had they lost. In a little while, Yehosheph's prophecy was confirmed. That year and the 6 following years were years of plenty. He had foretold. The harvest was so ample that a single ear produced 2 heaps of grain. And Yehoseph made circumspect arrangements to provide abundantly for the years of famine. He gathered up all the grains, and in the cities situated in the middle of each district, he laid up the produce from around about, and had ashes and earth strewn on the garnered food from the very soil on which it had been grown. Also, he preserved the grain in the ear, all these being precautions taken to guard against rot and mildew. The inhabitants of Egypt also tried on their own account to put aside a portion of the superabundant harvest of the 7 fruitful years against the need of the future. But when the grievous time of dearth came, and they went to their storehouses to bring forth the treasured grain, behold, it had rotted and became unfit for food. The famine broke in upon the people with such suddenness that the bread gave out unexpectedly. As they sat at their table, they had not even a bite of bran bread. Thus they were driven to apply to Yehoseph and beseech his help. And he admonished them, saying, give up your allegiance to your deceitful idols, and say, blessed is he who giveth bread unto all flesh. But they refused to deny their lying gods, and they betook themselves to Pharaoh, only to be told by him, go unto Yehoseph. What he saith to you, do. For this Pharaoh was rewarded. The Most High granted him long life and a long reign, until he became arrogant, and well-merited punishment overtook him. When the Egyptians approached Yehoseph with the petition for bread, he spoke, saying, I give no food to uncircumcised. Go hence and circumcise yourselves, and then return hither. They entered the presence of Pharaoh and complained to him regarding Yehoseph, but he said as before, go unto Joseph. And they replied, we come from Joseph, and he has spoken roughly unto us, saying, go hence and circumcise yourselves. We warned thee in the beginning that he is a Hebrew and would treat us in such wise. Pharaoh said to them, O ye fools, Did he not prophesy though through the Holy Spirit and proclaim to the whole world that there would come 7 years of plenty to be followed by 7 years of dearth? Why did you not save the yield of 1 or 2 years against the day of your need? Weeping, they made reply. The grain that we put aside during the good years hath rotted. Pharaoh, have you nothing over of the flour of yesterday? The Egyptians, the very bread in the baskets rotted. Why? The Egyptians, because Joseph willed us. Pharaoh, oh, you fools. If his words have power over the grain, making it to rot when he desireth it to rot, then also must we die, if so be his wish concerning us. Go therefore unto him and do as he bids thee. Now, I'm going to stop right here, but there is even more to this story, but I don't feel like reading all night. So I'm going to close the book, okay? I'm going to close this book. And I'm going to save some for another time. I'm closing the book. I hope you enjoyed that story. Even though I had very many interruptions I made, think of it as a commercial. All right. Thanks for joining me as I tell you the story that is in the book, The Legend of the Hebrews. Good night.